What's up, blasters, and welcome to this video where I show you my league starter for 0.3 in Path of Exile 2. I'll be playing a Lightning Arrow Deadeye, and I will show you the written guides that I have made for leveling and the endgame, so let's get into it. Alright, so on Mobalytics I made two guides, one for the leveling part of Deadeye and one for the endgame part, and in this video I'm going to talk about those a little bit. So why is Deadeye even good and why are we picking it? I personally think Deadeye is going to be very strong, mostly because it's something that we know is going to be good. There's lots of untested stuff that we don't know how it's going to behave yet because it's only going to go live once the patch is actually live. So it will take some time to figure out if that's really worth going for or if it's worth pursuing these things in the endgame. We do know though that Lightning Arrow Deadeye is a good build to play. It is very fast, it gets a lot of new tools in the patch, it has received a few buffs, and it's very strong in maps and against bosses as well. So a big disclaimer here, in the guide most of the stuff like the skill tree is not going to be updated for the patch yet because we don't know what the skill tree is going to look like exactly until the patch is actually live. So if there are some things that might not match what you're going to see in game, that is to be expected. So there's a few strengths and weaknesses for Deadeye, and Deadeye itself is a good class, a good ascendancy to play. It is quite easy to play, it is ranged, and you can play quite safe from the distance if you want to. But it's also a very fast starter in general because you have a lot of movement speed just natively in the tree itself, as we can see later on. And it also has an excellent endgame transition with Lightning Arrow into Lightning Rod. And it's very, very fun to play, is my opinion as well. I do like to play dexterity-based classes, and Deadeye is really cool. It does require a little bit of positioning though, and it can be quite squishy in the early game. Acts 1 and 2 specifically are a little bit hard, but it gets easier later on, and there's a few breakpoints you can hit while leveling to make your life easier. Right, if we jump into the leveling variants, I have a few progression steps noted down here. The first is level 1 to 5, where I noted down good things that you can potentially find or equip. It's mostly focused on getting flat damage on all of your items. Flat damage is very strong while leveling because it increases the damage quite significantly so, because our damage itself is quite low, and flat damage will be a big bonus to us and to our damage output in general. Right, the most important part is obviously to get flat damage on your bow. On level 1, you kind of have to use what you find. If you just find a crossbow, it's also worth to do that instead of going with the bow immediately. But a good boon would be to find a quiver, especially broadhead quiver here with physical damage, and then also have an affix on it that has lightning damage. In general, you should not look to upgrade these things too much with currency, rather save that for later. Reason being, because at level 6, we can actually get sockets on our gear, which is pretty good. And in level 6, we also want to make sure that we get the opportunity to swap to Stormcaller Arrow. Stormcaller Arrow itself is something that you can use instead of Lightning Arrow and Lightning Rod. It deals quite good damage, but you need to make sure that you have Scattershot and Martial Tempo equipped on Stormcaller, specifically so because on some bosses it's pretty good, and on others it's a little bit weaker. In general, for the first bosses in the first zones, it's usually better to just try to kill them with Bowshot, where you can just put Martial Tempo and Lightning Infusion on Bowshot itself. But other than that, you'll probably not have too many issues, especially if you're using Contagion, at least to clear. It's pretty good for the early levels. Bosses in the early game are a little bit of a weakness of the build, but it doesn't take too long to take them down, to be very honest, and it gets a lot faster later on. Right, so there's an important breakpoint that we can hit on level 11, which is the point where we can find Warden Bows. Warden Bows have the innate chance to chain an additional time, and that is very, very strong, specifically if you combine that with Lightning Rod and Lightning Arrow. On level 11, try to go to town, check the vendors for a bow, and potentially snag one of those if you can. It's a very big damage boost and something to look out for sure. I have noted down how the skills change as you progress through the levels. For example, we do drop Contagion. After like level 5, level 6, you kind of want to drop Contagion after you finish the Red Rail zone, because after that it's really not that strong anymore. It's more like an early game thing where you pick up Contagion before you pick up Lightning Rod, and it's something to just increase your very first levels, but if you don't do it, it's not the end of the world as well. And then on level 6 you can start adding more of the skills as you find more skill gems. Freezing Salvo, for example, is a really good gem to use because it deals quite a lot of damage. It freezes very consistently. The only downtime that Freezing Salvo has is that it has a cooldown, so you can't use it all the time, but you basically want to use this whenever it is off cooldown because it's a lot of damage from that. Another important breakpoint is on level 28, which is a little bit further out, and you usually reach that in Act 3. You can get a Dualstring Bow on level 28. Dualstring bows propel your damage quite significantly because Dualstring bows have the innate affix that they allow you to fire an additional arrow. That is incredibly strong, and this is where the build really starts coming together because then Lightning Arrow and Lightning Rod definitely outclass Stormcaller Arrow, and once you have the Dualstring Bow and once you're level 28, make sure to check the vendors, gamble for bows, and just try to get it. It's a very big bonus, and you should really look out for that. Alright, for the cruel acts or the later ones, I do have a setup noted here where I did put in all of the important affixes on gear and what to look for. In general, you want to focus on evasion and energy shield, mostly evasion early on and then add the energy shield later on. In general, you should not have too much of a difficult time, especially once you have a good Dualstring Bow. The last important level breakpoint would be level 55, where you can finally find twin bows, which is essentially just the upgraded version of a Dualstring Bow, but it essentially does the same, it just has higher base damage. Finally, but that is for the endgame variant then, and once you have progressed in maps already, at 78 you can find Gemini bows, which is like the ultimate version of the bow that has like the highest base damage. Alright, so when you find your bows, especially on level 11, on the Warden's Bow, you should try to unlock the bow, use an Artificer Orb that you get through the quest on that bow, and use whatever currency you have to increase the number of affixes on the bow, and then socket in a Storm Rune for additional lightning damage in that bow. I also did note what other stats to look out for, especially in the later variants. Yeah, once you have completed the campaign, you at first want to unlock Gathering Winds, and then you want to go for Projectile Proximity and Point Blank, and later on you want to pick up Endless Munitions, just because these will give you the easiest way of acquiring the damage bonuses and make sure that you have an easy time going through the campaign. Again, all of the stuff that you see in the skill tree is likely subject to change, but I did pick up some of the important big nodes. For example, Element Harness the Ambulance is a good one to get, and you'll pick up a lot of movement speed along the way, like Escape Velocity. There's also movement speed here in this part, and a lot of skill speed here too. Which is why Ranger is a pretty good starter in general. Right, I did also note down what quest rewards to pick, and how to play in general. You want to use Lightning Arrow for clearing, Freezing Salvo whenever it's off cooldown, to increase the damage output when you feel like you need to deal with tougher elites a little bit more. You want to start weaving in some lightning rods and also barrage up your lightning arrows for more damage in general. You can place down multiple lightning rods before the boss even spawns on many of the campaign bosses as well. But if the boss is fast moving, like Balbala in Act 2 for example, it's kind of hard to hit them with lightning rods consistently, and you want to make sure to just try to shoot more lightning arrows and potentially hit a freezing salvo once they stand still. And moving into the endgame part, it basically plays the same as it did in the early game. It just becomes a lot more potent. And I did note down what gear to look out for. We have two variants in the endgame. One is for early mapping, where we don't focus on crit chance just yet because our level is quite low and our gear might not be there. Focus more on just improving what we did in the leveling part. I did note down every single piece of gear and what to look out for in terms of stats. I did also note down a few jewel choices, like we want a Sapphire as early as we can to find a little bit of a solution for our mana problem. You want to have one Sapphire with mana on kill to be able to sustain your mana during mapping specifically. It's not as important in the campaign, but it does get a lot of significance later on. In the endgame, we also need to note, again, the disclaimer, a lot of the support gems are also subject to change. There's also new skill gems that we haven't tested yet, like Ice-Tipped Arrows that might actually be very good. An ice version of the build might actually be even stronger than Lightning Arrow, but we'll have to find that out once we are playing, and we have to look out for that. Right, we also have the Roar, which also gives us increased movement speed and lets us not slow down while shooting. The build itself is like really fast in the sense that you can get a lot of movement speed in the build. And that's also why Ranger and especially Deadeye is a very good pick, because later on we also get Wind Ward and Tailwind. Tailwind is super strong because it just increases our movement speed and our skill speed in general, which is very good. And in the end game we can get to over 130% movement speed even without like giga expensive gear. Deadeye is going to be an excellent choice for the end game itself. Once we are facing map bosses, we'll introduce the Tornado Shot as well. Tornado Shot is interesting because it scales more when you have more lightning arrows or like more projectiles that you shoot. You kind of want to position tornado shots on the boss and then position yourself so that you hit multiple tornadoes with one cast of lightning arrow. Why is that important? Because when you hit lightning arrow into tornado shot, the arrows will chain, and if the tornadoes are basically placed between the boss, like one in front of the boss and one behind the boss, you will chain all of the arrows into the boss, which will increase your damage quite significantly. For pinnacle bosses, it's quite similar. You also want to precast lightning rod on the boss spawning location, then precast frost bombs, cast voltaic mark to increase the lightning weakness on them, and then just cast ball lightning with a swap weapon and then just shoot your lightning arrows, have them chain around everything, and it should be very strong. In the previous seasons when I was playing lightning arrow, that was enough for T4 Zesht, so it should be really good even with like mediocre gear. Again, a lot of the guide is subject to change, just given that the fact that we don't have the live skill tree yet, we don't have some of the skill gems tested yet because there was just no opportunity to find out how they work. A lot of that is going to be updated as soon as I play, while I do the leveling and progress through the campaign on stream. And yeah, if you want to see how that all folds out and you want to see the stuff in action as well, make sure to check me out on twitch.tv/Mippy. I'll be streaming the 0.3 start all the way. I'll also share after the league is live for about 24 to 48 hours. I'll make a short video where I show my progress and update you guys on what I've learned and what I've tested. Alright guys, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like and comment of what you want to see more of in terms of PoE2 content. I'll be hopping into a practice run right after this, and I hope to see you guys tomorrow on stream when the league goes live, and until then, take it easy and see ya.